Hidden in us or them first 10 minutes. A clue that predicts the ending. Missed it? Let's blow your mind. The story begins on a remote island where two men are screaming in pain. Their cries echo across the island as guards tie them to gaming tables and cruelly cut out their tongues, leaving them in a horrifying state. Understand how they ended up here. The story flashes back to a few weeks earlier. A man named Jute had won a trip to this island through an online game. The prize allowed him to bring as many people as he wanted, so he invited his childhood friend Andy, his wife, and his father. Along with them, Jute's own wife, Hater, and his younger brother joined the trip. When the group arrived at the island, they were warmly welcomed by the hotel staff. Later, Jute and Andy were invited to meet the senior staff. During this meeting, a representative from the gaming company congratulated Jute on winning and offered him a chance to win up to $20 million by playing all the rounds of the game. Andy sensed something dangerous about this offer, but Jute, blinded by greed, refused to listen. The most dangerous rule of the game was that once players sat at the table, they would be tied down and could not leave until the game was over. Despite Andy's warnings, Jute insisted on playing. Their first round seemed simple. Each player had two buttons, red and blue. If both pressed the red button, they would split the prize money. If both pressed blue, neither would win, and each would owe $10,000 to the company. But if one pressed red while the other pressed blue, the blue player would take all the prize money while the red player would lose. Although Andy was suspicious, both he and Jute pressed red and each received $5,000. The money was real, which made Jute even more eager to continue. Andy, however, refused to play further, warning that something was terribly wrong. But Jute's greed convinced him to stay for the second round. Next game, the stakes were no longer just money. If both pressed red, they would each earn $500, but each would lose a finger. If both pressed blue, they would each lose a hand and owe $100,000. If one pressed red while the other pressed blue, the red player would lose a finger and owe $100,000, while the blue player would win. Jute laughed it off as a joke, but Andy was terrified. When the moment came, Jute betrayed Andy by pressing blue. Andy lost a finger, while Jute gained $100,000. From this point, Andy realized the host's words were not a joke. The game was deadly serious. Still, the host insisted they continue. In the third round, the stakes were their loved ones. Andy's father and Jute's brother were brought out. The rules forced them into a situation where someone's life would be lost no matter what they chose. Both men tried to save their relatives by pressing blue, but that decision cost their loved ones' lives and left them both with $1 million in debt. Jute blamed Andy, forgetting that his own greed had dragged them into this nightmare. The next round was even more horrifying. Their wives were brought forward. If both pressed red, they would win $5 million, but both wives would lose their tongues. If both pressed blue, both wives would die. If one pressed red and the other blue, the blue player would win everything, while the red player's wife would be killed. When it was time, Jute betrayed Andy again by pressing blue. Jute's wife, Hater, survived, but Andy's wife was brutally killed before his eyes, leaving him shattered. The rounds grew crueler. In the following game, the players themselves were targeted. If both pressed the red, they would get money, but each would lose an eye. If one pressed red and the other blue, the blue player would win, while the red player lost both eyes and became indebted. If both pressed blue, they would be killed immediately. Andy, broken and furious with Jute, wanted to end all, but the last second, he couldn't bring himself to kill his friend. Both pressed red, and each lost an eye in agony. This was the moment we had seen at the beginning, the men screaming after losing their eyes. The host coldly reminded them that everything was being broadcast live for an audience that paid to watch. Then came the final round. Hater, who had briefly escaped, was brought back as a player. This time, Andy and Jute were on the same team, while Hater played against them. The rules were clear. If Andy and Hater both pressed red, all three would survive, win $20 million, but each would lose an eye. If one pressed red and the other pressed blue, the blue player would live, win all the money, and the red player would be killed. If both pressed blue, all three would die. Jute begged Hater to choose red to save their lives, and she agreed. Andy, however, didn't trust her. Hader cried, claiming she was pregnant, and begged them to believe her. Against his better judgment, Andy softened and pressed red. At the last moment, Hader revealed her true nature and played blue instead. Andy and Jute were both killed, then revealed that Hader had never been pregnant. She had deceived everyone to save herself and claim the money. The host ended the game, thanking the audience. In the final scene, Hader herself is shown as the new host, ready to continue the deadly cycle and profit from the suffering of others. And with that, the story ends. The hidden clue in the first 10 minutes of Us or Them appears when the group first arrives at the island. The hotel staff welcomes them warmly, but the camera lingers for a few extra seconds on the gaming tables in the background. At the time, it looks like just part of the set, but those very tables become the place where Andy and Jute are chained and tortured later in the story. This early visual hint foreshadows that the vacation prize was never a gift. It was a trap from the beginning. Got a better theory? Drop it in the comments. The best take it to shout out in our next video.